Imagine the following scene. You're standing in a completely empty room. There's no sound, no movement, just you and absolute silence. For some, this idea brings a sense of calm. For others, it sparks an almost unbearable discomfort. At its core, though, it raises an intriguing question. Why does silence provoke such different reactions? We live in a time where every moment is filled with some kind of noise. From constant phone notifications to the never-ending hum of traffic, silence has become a rarity, almost an anomaly. It seems like we're running away from it. But what are we really trying to avoid? Is it possible that silence unsettles us because it reveals who we truly are? For Arthur Schopenhauer, silence was more than just the absence of noise. It was a powerful magnifying glass, capable of amplifying everything we carry inside us. He believed silence was indispensable for introspection and accessing true wisdom. According to him, those who cannot stand silence often struggle to face themselves. Think of silence as this magnifying glass. It doesn't create anything new, but it reveals with precision our deepest truths and sometimes our greatest fears. The more a person has within themselves, the less they need from the outside world to be entertained. Schopenhauer once wrote, "Perhaps, then, the discomfort we feel in silence says less about the silence itself and more about what's missing within us." And you, when was the last time you allowed yourself to sit in complete silence? No music, no videos, no distractions. Could it be that, deep down, you've been avoiding the only voice silence allows you to hear? Your own? Schopenhauer saw silence as a kind of dividing line between ordinary and exceptional minds. To him, silence wasn't an uncomfortable void, but a fertile ground, where creativity and reflection could flourish. He believed that, in the absence of external noise, the mind was compelled to dive into its own depths. And it's there, in that quiet space, that truly original ideas are born, unlike isolation, which is marked by a sense of abandonment. Silence is a state of presence. It's like a spacious room where thoughts are free to dance, connect, and form something greater. Schopenhauer understood this and made silence a cornerstone of his routine. Away from the distractions of the outside world, he found the ideal environment to develop his ideas, including those that shaped his most famous work, The World as Will and Representation. Now, think about this in today's context. How many of your ideas have never come to fruition because the noise around you hasn't given your mind the space it needs to work? Imagine a writer, surrounded by the constant buzz of notifications and obligations, trying to create something original but always feeling adrift, like Schopenhauer. Maybe what's missing is that silent space where ideas can truly take shape. For Schopenhauer, silence wasn't a luxury but a necessity. It's what separates relentless noise from inner discovery, mediocrity from brilliance. The question he leaves us with is this: can we recognize the transformative potential of silence? Or will we continue to see it merely as an uncomfortable pause? Something to be filled as quickly as possible. We live in an era where silence is practically a stranger. Every second of our day is invaded by notifications, alerts, and updates. There's always something to listen to, watch, or respond to. And if, by chance, silence appears, it's quickly replaced by a podcast, a playlist, or the ambient noise of our hyper-connected lives. However, this relentless search for stimulation comes with an invisible cost: our ability to think deeply. Research by the American Psychological Association, APA, shows that constant notifications not only increase anxiety levels, but also fragment our attention, preventing the mind from reaching deeper states of reflection. It's as if we're always jumping between thoughts, never taking the time to dive into any of them. The result: we lose the ability to concentrate, create, and even connect genuinely with ourselves. Picture a typical day. You wake up and, before even getting out of bed, you check your phone. During breakfast, there's a playlist playing in the background. At work, your email pings every minute, interspersed with WhatsApp messages. On your commute home, a podcast replaces the silence. The day ends with the TV on while your phone rests beside your bed, but never completely turned off. What do all these moments have in common? Not a single one is left for pure, uninterrupted thought. Silence can be compared to a battery. It recharges our mental energy, allowing us to process information, organize ideas, and make meaningful connections. Without silence, we're always draining this battery, living in a constant state of overload. Schopenhauer was right when he said, "The less you are distracted by the outside world, the more you can find within yourself what truly matters." Perhaps the greatest gift we can give ourselves amidst this digital chaos is the space for intentional silence, setting aside moments to hear what our minds have to say, instead of letting them be shaped by an endless flow of noise. The question remains, how would your life look if, for just one day, you let your battery recharge? Why are we so afraid of being alone with our thoughts? It seems like a simple question, but it carries immense weight. In a world where we're encouraged to distract ourselves at every turn, silence becomes almost subversive. It's not just the absence of sound. It's a mirror reflecting everything we are and everything we fear. For many, it brings to light truths we'd rather ignore. Facing silence is like stepping into a dark room, where our fears and insecurities await a conversation we've been postponing for far too long. Carl Jung introduced the concept of the shadow, a psychological space where we store parts of ourselves that we deem inadequate or undesirable. Freud, in turn, described how these repressed aspects shape our behavior in ways we don't even realize. In silence, these parts gain a voice. It's as if we're standing before an empty stage, with all curtains drawn except for the one revealing our inner selves. The difference is that, in the noise of daily life, it's easy to avoid this confrontation. In silence, there's nowhere to hide. This reality is not just a philosophical or psychological theory. It is lived in raw form through experiences like Viktor Frankl's. In the concentration camps, where silence was an oppressive constant, Frankl found something unexpected: meaning. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, he describes how, even amidst the greatest inhumanity, he was able to find purpose in facing his pain and solitude. The forced silence wasn't an emptiness, but a space where he could reflect on what truly mattered. Think also of Vipassana meditation retreats, where silence is elevated to the level of spiritual practice. For days or even weeks, participants disconnect entirely from the outside world. No music, no conversations, no distractions. In the first days, most people report intense discomfort, as if every repressed emotion and forgotten thought surfaces all at once. But gradually, something changes. The silence, once uncomfortable, becomes a source of clarity and acceptance. It stops being a challenge and transforms into a refuge, a space where people discover strengths they never knew they had. However, embracing silence requires courage. Courage to face the inner voices that whisper doubts, insecurities, and fears. Courage to accept that, sometimes, what we avoid in silence is precisely what we most need to hear. Silence teaches us that we cannot escape ourselves, but it also shows that we don't need to fear this coexistence. It invites us to integrate our shadows and truly know ourselves. So, consider this. If silence could tell you something about who you really are, would you be ready to listen? Or would you keep filling the void with noise, postponing that necessary conversation? Silence has always been an essential element in the creation of great works and the thought processes of extraordinary minds. It's not just the absence of noise, but a space where brilliance finds the freedom to express itself. Throughout history, figures like Leonardo da Vinci and Albert Einstein made silence an indispensable part of their creative journeys. For them, it was like a blank canvas, allowing complex ideas to unfold and take shape. Leonardo da Vinci, for example, was known for spending hours observing the world in silence. For him, silence was a form of contemplation, a way to capture the essence of what he saw and transform these observations into creations that transcend time. Silence allowed him to explore the invisible connections between art, science, and nature. Imagine Da Vinci sitting before a landscape, free of distractions, with nothing but a notebook and his infinite curiosity, shaping in his thoughts what would later become the Mona Lisa or his anatomical studies. Einstein also valued silence as part of his creative process. He often retreated for long walks, far from the noise of his era, allowing his mind to explore concepts like time and space. It was in silence that the ideas that would shape the theory of relativity emerged. For Einstein, silence was a necessary pause to reorganize the complexity of his thoughts and find solutions that would change the world forever. In art, silence is not merely a pause, but an expressive component. Composers like Beethoven mastered the use of silence in their work. In his symphonies, moments of pause were not empty. They were filled with tension, emotion, and meaning. They created anticipation, gave weight to what came before, and prepared the listener for what was to follow. In his hands, silence was as powerful as the notes he wrote. Even in cinema, silence plays a crucial role. In films like Into Great Silence, which documents the life of Carthusian monks, the absence of dialogue and soundtrack is not just a stylistic choice, but a way to immerse the viewer in contemplation. The film challenges us to experience silence in its purest form. Far from conventional narratives and the fast pace we're accustomed to, these examples show that silence is not merely a pause or an emptiness, but an active and transformative element. It allows creativity and expression to reach levels that constant noise could never achieve. Perhaps the remaining question is, how can we incorporate this kind of silence into our own lives? Despite its depth, silence can be integrated into everyday life in simple and practical ways. It doesn't require retreating to a monastery or spending weeks in meditation to reap its benefits. Small moments of stillness can bring significant transformations in how we perceive the world and ourselves. A first step could be to start your day with 5 minutes of absolute silence, before picking up your phone, turning on the TV, or diving into the morning rush. Allow yourself to sit in silence. Find a comfortable spot, close your eyes if you prefer, and simply observe your breathing or the environment around you. This initial moment is like aligning your inner compass before facing the fast-paced rhythm of the day. Another transformative practice is trying a digital detox for a few hours or even an entire afternoon. Turn off notifications, put your phone in a drawer, and disconnect from social media. Use this time to go for a walk, read, or simply contemplate your surroundings. By eliminating digital noise, you'll notice how silence creates space for reflections often drowned out by the constant flow of information. A simple yet effective idea is to set aside a weekly moment for walking without music or podcasts instead of seeking external stimuli. Let yourself listen to the sound of the wind, your footsteps on the ground, or even your own thoughts. These silent walks can feel like oases of calm in the desert of modern busyness, recharging your mind and body. Incorporating silence might seem challenging in such a noisy world, but small acts like these make all the difference. It's not about eliminating all noise, but about creating intentional spaces where quietness can flourish. After all, silence is not just the absence of sound, but a presence, a powerful invitation to listen to what's inside us and what the world around us has to say. Silence might seem passive, but in a world overflowing with noise and distractions, it becomes an act of resistance. We live in a society where constant exposure to noise, literal or metaphorical, is used to keep us busy, diverting our attention from what truly matters. For thinkers like Michel Foucault and Herbert Marcuse, noise is a tool of control, a way to prevent people from developing critical thinking and questioning the status quo. In today's context, this idea resonates even more. Social media, incessant news, advertisements, and constant entertainment create an environment where there's no room for reflection. Noise, in this sense, isn't just sound, but a curtain that blocks our view of what lies behind. Silencing this interference is like pulling back that curtain and seeing what was once hidden. It's an act of courage and independence. Think of silence as a peaceful weapon. It's not aggressive but profoundly powerful. When you choose not to react immediately, not to consume compulsively, or not to be swept away by the frenetic pace around you, you're resisting the manipulation that constant noise tries to impose. It's like standing at a busy intersection and, instead of following the crowd, questioning where everyone is going and whether it's truly the right path. Practices of intentional silence, such as meditation, retreats, or even simple moments of contemplation, become ways to reclaim our time and minds, instead of letting the world dictate what we think and feel. These moments restore our autonomy over our thoughts. In silence, we find space to critique, create, and decide with clarity. In a world that never stops shouting, silence is a revolutionary act. This idea encapsulates how silence can be a form of active resistance. It empowers us to step back, observe, and question the dominant narrative. While noise compels us to react, silence invites us to reflect. So the next time you feel pressured to stay constantly engaged, ask yourself, what would happen if you simply stopped? If you silence the world around you and listen to what your mind truly has to say? Perhaps it's in that silent space that real resistance begins. Silence, so often ignored or feared, emerges as one of the greatest teachers we can have. It not only connects us to who we truly are, but also challenges us to confront what we avoid. Schopenhauer showed us that silence is the key to introspection and wisdom. Jung reminded us that it can reveal our shadows, while practices like meditation teach us that silence is a path to acceptance and transformation. In a world overwhelmed by distractions, silence is the pause that allows us to reorganize our thoughts and find clarity. It's not an emptiness, but a space brimming with possibilities. It's where great ideas are born, where creativity flourishes, and where the mind can shed the excess of stimuli. Beethoven used silence as part of his music. Einstein sought silence to think. And us, do we have the courage to do the same? When we choose silence, we're not just rejecting the noise around us. We're creating a space to hear what truly matters. It connects us to ourselves and the world in ways that noise never could. However, this choice requires courage and intention. Facing silence means facing ourselves. And that's not always easy, but it's transformative. So if silence has so much to teach us, what's stopping you from starting now? Perhaps its greatest lesson is this: noise can fill time, but only silence can fill the soul. As Schopenhauer wrote, the man who needs noise is fleeing from himself. Maybe it's time to stop running. Set aside 10 minutes of your day for complete silence. Just listen. Listen to what your mind has to say, to the pauses between sounds, and discover what you've been ignoring. Silence might feel uncomfortable at first, but it always has something to teach. The question is, are you willing to listen?